Well, good evening and welcome to About the Valley. And I have as my guest tonight Dr. Catherine Stickney, who is
Thank you.
our school superintendent and chairman of the school committee, Mike LaBrasseur. And I don't have to say, word is out over town. We're going to be looking at well, not a possibility, but it's most likely we've got to do something.
We're in difficult
Yeah,
straits.
yeah.
It's a difficult situation.
So the first step is to find out what we're going to do.
Yes.
Exactly.
Make it simple, in
Mm-hmm.
simple terms. An evaluation of the whole situation with the Balmer School, and not just the Balmer School, but also Cross Street,
Yes. Correct.
yeah,
And
and even the
potentially-
middle school,
Potentially the middle school.
yeah. So it's a look at the whole system, other than the high school, which of course is fairly new.
We're very fortunate with
Yeah.
the high school. Yes.
I say fairly new, but it's what? How many years has it been?
15.
15. How fast that went by?
2001 it opened,
Yes.
right?
That is amazing. Where did time go?
Yeah.
You realize that uh, kids in the kindergarten at the time when it opened have graduated from there.
Yes.
So that gives you an idea how fast that went.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Balmer School is in pretty dire straits right now.
It is.
So I want to really explain to people, because what's coming up right now and what's going to come up Tuesday night town meeting
Mm-hmm.
is a vote to uh, appropriate funds to do the study.
Correct.
And the question around town, I'm hearing this for everything, why so much? That's what I want to give you a chance to explain to the people, is I know why, because it's mandated by the state,
Correct.
and it involves a lot more than what you probably would do if you were a private business. But state mandates a lot of stuff, and you got to do it their way. If you don't do it their way, you're not going to get anything out of them.
Right.
So what does it exactly involve, this study?
Well, this has actually been a process, knowing that the Balmer School is 50 years old. Most of the building, and as the pictures in our presentation the last evening and at the Board of Selectmen's meeting would demonstrate, we still have many of the same fixtures, some issues with flooring and windows and electrical. And that has led to us, to the district, submitting what's called an SOI, a statement of interest, in the fact that we have interest in looking at doing there's a whole list of classifications, whether it's a renovation or an addition. It's a standard list for any school system throughout the Commonwealth. And school systems go through for each building and would check off what their interest is. For example, there are many projects going on right now around the state where schools need just a roof.
Right.
So maybe they have a building that isn't quite as old as 50 years. Maybe it's been in existence 20, 25 years, which is the average span for a life of a roof. And they would seek out a different kind of project. And so one would go through and check off what the interest is. So we have been submitting statements of interest for core projects, knowing that it's the core of our buildings that need assistance. And without having those submitted, unless there's an absolute state of emergency, the Massachusetts School Building Authority will not recognize a project for reimbursement without going through this process. So since 2009, we have been submitting annual statements as approved by Board of Selectmen and the school committee to go through and indicate our need to be included on this list. And you must be accepted. There's a building tour. So we had been rejected for years and years, but we were in the pipeline, so to speak.
Right.
And then in 2014, we received a telephone call, and as they were going through the statements of interest and looking at all of the criteria and the status of our building, that our building was still fairly original,
Right.
that was concerning to them. And they asked if they could come out and do a school tour at that point. So they brought a team of six people, I believe, and we toured the entire building for 2.5 hours from the roof into the boiler room. And then we received the phone call in 2015 that they were interested in inviting us into this process because they felt we were, of the 96 schools that had applied, they chose 26 that were of critical need, the most needy and urgent.
Oh, okay. Well, now that clarifies something here. This is not something that you initiated. This is actually being initiated by these inspectors
Correct.
that came in and looked at the Barmer School.
Well, we initially initiate with the statement
Right,
of interest.
right, but that's a standard
They
procedure.
Yes.
the MSBA vets all the proposals, and then they
Right.
determine which
Well, I'm
ones
saying,
seem.
they initiated the concept that you may have to build a new school.
They
Yes.
reached out to us and said,
Right.
we are concerned.
Right,
One thing that I think I'd like to mention, I think is really important, is that if we get to the feasibility study stage, what that is going to look at is, do we need a school? Is it a renovation
Right.
project? Is it a renovation combined with an addition? They're going to take a look at that, and I was reading the MSBA site just the other day, and they look for the most cost-effective ways to put a project together to address whatever deficiencies a school may have. They want to do as many projects as they can, so they're not just looking to spend as much money as possible. They want to be very frugal with their money
Right.
and do the right thing. And it may be a new school, it may be something less than that, but that's going to be all what's determined as we go through this feasibility study.
right, so it's not a definite that,
No.
Oh, not at all.
right. I mean, they're gonna look and see, can these deficiencies be corrected
Correct.
on site with the current building?
Yes.
And that will be decided by professionals, designers, engineers, architects. That will be part of that process, and that's all part of that feasibility study.
And that is the major, to get back to your point, the cost and why the cost is so large to go through this process, because they are very diligent. And they're very diligent in the process of going through and assessing the building, but they will also go in, because we have two other statements of interest with NES at Cross Street and the middle school, because we have grade 5, which is considered elementary. That's what makes the middle school eligible at this time also.
Oh, okay. We got a phone call here, and that's what I want to let people talk. Go ahead, caller, go on. You're on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you from the, to everybody from the Northbridge community to the Northbridge School District family, and I just want to say a lot of taxpayers appreciate everything you're doing, and I just want to get that out first.
Thank you.
Right now, there's a kind of a misconception out there about the taxpayers are going to be paying all this $775,000 feasibility study, and I had to clarify with a couple of people this morning that there's a 50 to a 57% reimbursement, and then also there's going to be maybe some money coming out of the town reserves or short-term borrowing, so there's going to be basically no cost to the taxpayer on this feasibility study, if that's correct.
Yeah, so for the feasibility study, we are approved at a 57% reimbursement rate, and that's for eligible expenses. So within that 775, 57% of the eligible expenses in there. And what's also important to know is that whether or not we move forward with an actual building project, construction project, we will still be reimbursed for the cost for the feasibility study.
Well, that's excellent news.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. And the town manager has identified $350,000 that he would earmark from free cash, and the other 400 some odd $1,000 based on the timing of when we get reimbursements and the actual cost would be covered through short-term borrowing initiatives.
Right, which would be
If
paid back
necessary.
once the state reimburses.
Exactly. So there would be, in essence, there's really no impact on the
That's
direct tax.
that's excellent news, and that's a good clarification to the for the taxpayers that may have been confused on that. The other thing, I think, speaking with my neighbors, I mean, they were really taken back, and they were really felt the same way as the Board of Selectmen when they acknowledged all the deficiencies you brought up, and I don't think a lot of people were aware of all these deficiencies, and I'm glad that the town manager and the Board of Selectmen acknowledged that the other night, and them signing that certificate, for the application process to the building school committee, and I
appreciated their partnership and collaboration very much.
Oh,
They
great.
have been very much in the loop. Mr. Kozak he went into Boston with us and attended the board meeting. He's been on our conference calls, and from the very beginning when they contacted us in 2014 and said, we have concerns, we want to come see this building for ourselves, we had included him right away and said, we want you to know, looking forward, because they're very clear at advising people, be mindful of the condition of your building, because even if you do start thinking about any changes, it could be 5 to 6 years out before you're actually into a more comfortable environment.
Right. And another good point is that you're talking about a 50 or a 57% reimbursement now, and say if something happens in the future or whatnot, there's no guarantee, like the next time the town applies, that it could be a 50% or a 57% reimbursement. And because I know Harry knows, like on the high school we got an 80%,
Yes.
but now it's been reduced to 57%, and who knows the next time we may not get anything. So this is really a great deal.
Yeah, when we attended the MSBA meeting in March, they cautioned the districts that were being invited into the program to be conservative in their estimates. So we're locked in for this year for the 57%, but when we go to, so there's really no question on that, but they evaluate their formula every year, and every district is looked at differently, and each district gets a different reimbursement rate. So as we get to the next step, if we move along there, our reimbursement rate will certainly change, but we know for sure we're locked into that 57%.
And
But it's a lot better than zero, right?
Well, it is,
Absolutely.
and I think that so far we have been reaching out because the MSBA encourages districts, and that's how we reached the $775,000 mark, was consulting with other districts that are going through this process and looking at doing our research at 20 to 25 districts and speaking directly with 8 to 10 of them. So far, we had the highest reimbursement rate at this point.
Wow,
So
that's
we are
excellent.
very fortunate. Most of the districts that we were looking at, we're lucky to have, I saw anywhere typically from right around 40%, to be honest, 40
Wow,
to
so
45.
we're really in a good
Substantial difference.
reimbursement rate. And lastly, I see the DP director around town. I'm going to ask him to sharpen his pencil when he issues your invoice for indirect costs, and I'm going to hope that he gives you some breathing room, because I know all the budgetary issues going on with the schools and the state funding and Chapter 70 and unfunded mandates. So I'm going to ask him if he can throw a little bit of extra Northbridge support your way. And I just want to say I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and thank you, Harry, for having them on tonight. And it's very good to get this out and stop any misconceptions that the taxpayers are paying for this $775,000 feasibility study. Good night, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it's important that we reiterate what he said, that this money will be reimbursed regardless of
Yes.
whether you construct
Yes.
or not.
Yep.
Because that was put out, and that's erroneous.
Yes, that is,
Okay, so-
that is incorrect.
Because this is the first step, and we have to that has to be appropriate at the town meeting. So people don't think, oh, I'm not gonna vote for that, because what if they don't do anything? We're gonna be out that $700,000. No, you're not. It's already in the cards.
The beauty about what they're describing to us in this process is once we go through all of the initial steps during this eligibility period, and as we complete that, they immediately, entering the next phase when we're approved, open up an account for us. So as soon as we start having expenses, they will begin reimbursing each expense. So we may technically never even get to that short-term the need for the short-term borrowing.
Similar to like when we constructed the high school.
Correct.
Yeah. But, the thing is that people have to realize, number one, you gotta educate your populace. What's worse, having a bunch of dumb people that wouldn't be able to get a job? Come on, be realistic.
Well, it's,
Anybody who's and my partners, you're not gonna have, people in town don't have the money to go out and pay for private education. Not everyone has that. So if you don't have public education, we have no education.
Recently, I ran into someone, and we had a very constructive conversation about this, and ultimately, the point was raised that this looking forward to building a new building, or just making the necessary accommodations that we
Right.
need to ensure that our students are in a safe, clean, sound environment will only help improve property value and hopefully bring in more business.
Well, the building, what, 1968?
Yes,
That's when it was occupied.
yes.
So construction probably started 2 years prior.
The building committee was established in 1964.
Right. That's when they established the building committee, and then they got started.
It took
See?
5
So you can see
years.
it takes a long
Yeah.
time. But a lot of changes have come since then. They used asbestos back then.
Yes.
And there's asbestos in the tiles in
Yeah.
Balmer
Yeah.
School.
The same thing, situation here. We covered
Right.
it.
Yeah.
They probably had some lead piping.
There's actually, we know that there are issues with the plumbing in and of itself. I
Right.
actually reached out today and had a very good conversation, as we do regularly with the water company,
Yeah.
because they come in and they do testing for us, or we have testing done, and we are required to notify our parents about
Right.
concerns. So at this point, we definitely know our fixtures have lead within the fixtures, and most likely some of the soldering material, whether it be lead or copper.
Right.
The piping in and of itself and that composition, I'm not necessarily clear on. But we know the water that's coming from the town is just fine. However, we have certain points, we work with the water company, we have certain points in the building where if we run that water every morning at certain points for 20 minutes, the quality of the water is just fine.
Oh.
If it's not flushed out, we just advise not to drink from those. So we have bubblers, original bubblers and water fountains that we do not use. Those are closed for students, just because we don't want to waste all the water flushing every fixture
Right.
every day.
It might be a bigger problem in the middle school because the original high school part is well over 100 years old.
Yes, 1905.
Yeah, and then the junior high section is going to be close to 100 years old.
That's a very good point that you've raised that we've heard around town. People are asking, why would they not have chosen the middle school? Because clearly it is the oldest building. And you had
Well,
the best
we
explanation.
had been given some information that because there have been recent renovations done to that. I
Right.
hesitate to call it a building because it has so many additions, but it's a building. But because of all the renovations that have happened over the years, it has had more recent work than
Right.
Balmer has. You know, I think the only real original thing that has been addressed at Balmer is the roof.
correct.
So other than that, it's everything else is original, right down to some of the equipment in the bathrooms. The student bathrooms are original.
And the kitchen.
And the kitchen.
In fact, I don't know if the guys in the back in the control room, can we show some of those pictures? Are you ready? There you go. There's
Yes.
the original bathroom, right?
The sinks that still have the pedals on the floor. They thought, apparently I've heard that they thought that was very exciting.
That seems kind of strange to have pedals on the floor when you're talking very young children.
Yes.
I mean, that's all right in the machine shop. But yeah, this seems strange. Do we have some more guys? Oh, they're working on it. Well, when you get it up, we'll keep an eye on the monitor.
Well, and those pictures are available in the presentation that's on our website.
Yes, you can go to, the web address is,
www.nps.org, and it's the first story right up on the screen.
that's NCS?
NPS.
NPS.
For Northbridge Public Schools.
NPS, okay, Northbridge Public Schools, nps.com.
.org.
Very easy to get, what is that?
That is actually the back of the ovens at Balmer
Oh,
School.
wow.
Original oven.
The original ovens. Some of that piping is new because, as I'm sure people will remember, we came forward
Yes.
looking for some assistance because the kitchen was actually shut down with the original gas piping.
Yeah, you had leaks, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can't let that go.
So our students went without hot lunch. Fortunately, it was spring and then into summer.
Notice the boiler?
Correct. And that sign, the caution sign, warns that there's asbestos.
Ah.
That is one of the boilers.
Boy, yes, you know, like you
It's
say, back
original.
then though, nothing was thought of that. That was,
Right.
asbestos was a wonderful thing. It really, I mean, you wore asbestos gloves. People, nobody thought anything of it, but now it's really a problem. And well, there you go.
That is that's a picture looking down the center of the computer lab of Balmer School. It's actually not a full classroom, and it was never designed to have the capacity of 25 computers, desktops.
Well, in '68, nobody perceived the
thought?
use of laptop computers.
Well, it's interesting, the advances in technology, even since we've built the high school,
Oh, yeah.
is unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, you'll see, we have other pictures that you can see in the presentation that shows wires, cabling, just all over the place, because everything, there's
That's
a hub of technology right there,
in the side of a fourth grade classroom.
because there was not the wiring, obviously, in the building to accommodate. And if you think about all the technology that's in the schools used by the administrators, the teachers, and even in cases of students as well, you know, there's a lot of technology in there that was not part of anything back in 1967.
Do we have here?
That is one of our, it was a smaller classroom. We're now currently using it as an office space. That is a crack that's going down through all of the cinder blocks from the ceiling down to the right-hand side and then back, and it goes along the wall where the electrical outlet is at the bottom. So we have structural
That was a pretty wet
deficiencies.
area.
That's what my understanding is. That's what I've heard.
I told you I have some pictures of the construction. I'll have to dig those out. I know they're in my computer, right? I got the slides that my uncle took, who was on the building committee.
Wow.
And you can see how they were moving the water around and things like that. And this is the roof, or?
That is one section of the roof. The darker areas are where the water pools. The roof was replaced in 1994, so it's only 22 years old. However, I say only 22 years old.
Well, the roof on
That's-
your house is 20, you know, after less than 20 years, usually you got to replace it.
So, and they know that the roof is an issue as well. That is another portion of the roof where the ladder that goes up to the roof and the chimney for the boilers. But again, where the water pools, that is actually a slide of the carpool lane in front of that, next door to the playground. I believe that's the original blacktop.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
may have been resurfaced at one point, but that's where our students play in the afternoon. That's pretty much the surface. So, not ideal. That happens to be a set of doors, original doors, that go out to the courtyard, but the reason that the hand is there is to demonstrate the size of the
size of the opening.
space. Yes.
And that's all, the heat goes out that in the winter.
Correct.
Yeah.
And being such an antiquated heating system as it is, parts of the building in the winter, we have to turn the heat way up. We're losing energy, heat's escaping.
There's
and then
the
parts of the
antiquated
building,
system right
yes,
there, right?
there it is. And then portions of the building actually end up being cooler and others are far too warm.
Is it oil or gas?
I believe that there's been some transition.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we converted so
To
that
gas?
we can take advantage of, as the markets change.
Oh, okay, so like the town
Yes.
hall.
Yeah,
you
we can
you
go
either
oil
way.
or gas, yeah. So we did that, I can't remember which way we went recently, probably to oil, right? So,
Well, probably everyone was going to gas.
right, I can't remember how long ago it was. It was only a few years ago.
But the thing is, the efficiency of the boilers in '68 compared to now is, it's unbelievably
Right.
different.
Well, we've also fielded many questions over the past few years from citizens asking why we're not looking into solar and why we're not looking to put solar panels, especially on that nice flat roof that we have at Balmer.
Right.
And if it is not a newer roof, they won't even consider the project.
No, they won't.
But in looking at any particular options that they may present to us, we know that any option they will present would provide energy efficiency.
Oh, yeah, I mean, once you build new, you can look at things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and MSBA wants to encourage that type of construction as well, so they would look for opportunities for that.
And they give us extra bonus points toward reimbursement
Oh.
using some more
But what this
energy
also
efficiency.
does is allow you to cut costs, your heating costs, your electrical costs. I mean, so in the long run, it can be great savings.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but if we are looking at a new school, there's no area picked out yet.
No.
That would be
no.
part of the feasibility study.
Correct. That's one of the pieces that goes into the cost.
And also in that would be the possibility of taking the middle school and combining it with the elementary,
At least
Or-
grade 5.
or at least, maybe even well, I don't know if you call it, the earlier grades, was it 1 and 2 at the cross street?
Pre-K.
Right now it's pre-K, K, and 1. Preschool
Okay,
through grade
but
1.
combining all in one building.
That's one of the options that they're
Right.
interested to find out if we're willing to consider. And quite honestly, as we're working with them, we're willing to hear any options they have for us. We really want what's best for the students
Right.
and families in the community.
Now, the other question I get from everybody is, what are they gonna do with all those buildings? Well, wouldn't the feasibility study look at that as well?
We're hoping they might give us some insight. Definitely they belong to the town.
Right.
I've had a few interesting conversations with people that have said, well, if you move out of Balmer School, could it be a satellite police station? Could we utilize that as a fire station and maybe,
Or maybe
do
a
some
safety
renovations to that?
facility and have both fire and police.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or use that for fields, really have a nice
Yep.
set of fields. So I think that'll be the great thing again about feasibility and needing to go through this is that we might.
Right, and that's all incorporated in that feasibility
Yes.
study. See, so to make people understand, it's not just looking at whether you're gonna have a new school or not, but where it would be located, what would you do with the other buildings, all this. So that's why it's quite intense, and that's why it's so expensive.
We'll also, at the end of that, we'll also be provided an initial schematic design. So we'll even have an idea of whatever the project would be, what would it look like? And that's what is then used to determine the initial cost. So we'll even have some design done by the time we get through the feasibility study. And part of that feasibility study, it includes, we hire an owner's project manager who oversees the whole project. We hire a designer, architect. That's part of that.
It's
Right.
required.
Yeah, and as well as all the, they'll do all the site assessments, they'll test the land wherever they're looking. So there's obviously a lot that goes into it, but to know that at the end, we'll have something that says, okay, this is what we're potentially looking at, I think is really important for people to know too. We're not gonna then just start from scratch again.
Yeah,
They also take a look at our capital plan that we have in place now, and they'll look and see the projects that we have listed that we've identified as the greatest need. And that would be another bonus to this included in the schematic design would be considering all the projects that we would not need to consider in a budgetary perspective moving forward.
right, yes. And also, the concept's gonna take into consideration what class sizes will look like in the future.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're
Which-
required to do an enrollment projection.
Which is important, because you don't wanna build it too small, you don't wanna build it too large, but you wanna meet that criteria, that perfect level, which I think the high school has worked out pretty well, hasn't it?
We have been very pleased, very fortunate so far that it's been just right. We do end up with some classes that are larger, but that's the beauty of being able to having such a nice facility and
Right.
move classes around.
And then you'd be able to put all the new technology in as well, which could save money in the end.
Definitely. Some of the money that we're looking at right now, projecting in terms of utilizing the E-rate funding that's out there, the opportunities to help cost share as we look at the infrastructure. And we have people that come in and say, I can't get on the Wi-Fi, or their cell phones won't work, or we have the students have gone, we take a class into the computer lab and all of a sudden no one can get on because everything slows down because of the bandwidth. So we've been addressing all those all along, but we know we still have work to do and that'll be expensive. But that would also, again, any work could be included, will be included in the cost. The hardware and the infrastructure.
Right. If anybody out there watching, this is the time to call now. We only got a half hour left. You call it 10 minutes of, it's gonna be too late. If you got any questions, call, now you can get them answered. Here's the people that can answer the questions.
And we're happy to do that. If we don't
Yeah.
have the answer, we're still having regular phone conversations with MSBA. We have our own contact consultant. Had a call on Tuesday evening. So we're still in the learning process ourselves, but they've been very helpful with all of that moving forward.
And one other thing that we're in what's called the eligibility period right now. That's sort of
Right.
all the preparation to move into feasibility. And while the vote to fund the feasibility is probably the most important thing, there are also 6 or 7 other things that we need to accomplish in the time frame. But one of them is also creating a school building committee. So we will have to put together a committee of individuals, both from the school department, from the town, as well as the community, people with expertise in engineering or architecture, design, finance, that can volunteer their time to be part
Well,
of this
didn't the
committee.
building construction committee oversee the high school?
I'm not sure that was before my time, but the school building committee is a requirement of the MSBA.
I
Now,
see.
how we work together with the BPCC, I think we need to figure that part out. But we do need to have a school building committee in place.
Because
Yes.
that committee has required experts on it.
Yes.
Maybe we can
Yep.
tap into some of those
Right.
experts as well.
And we've had some people in the community already reach out to us that have expertise in
Right.
these areas that have been very helpful in helping us really target our questions and be more specific so far, as specific as we can.
Have you looked at any areas? I mean, is there anything at the school committee talking about any particular area? I remember when Henry O'Donnell was here, he liked that Hill Street, the Crowell's Farm, because it was so big, and he could see, okay, I put a high school, I could put a future
Oh, yeah.
elementary school, and they could put everybody up there.
I will say, one of the most popular ideas that I've heard tossed around town, it was not discussed at school
No,
committee.
we haven't discussed
No,
it.
because quite honestly, that would be the cart before the horse.
Right.
We need to, see what they recommend for us. I have had people, as a matter of fact, being at the Board of Selectmen's, trying to give us suggestions, and it would be all of our suggestions, but wouldn't it be great to have a complex, to use some space behind the high school and maybe take some of the congestion off that section of Linwood going toward the Balmer School, but look at maybe something in the back of the high school, back by the upper fields, that could provide a cut through from
To
122.
Providence Road, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Oh,
and wouldn't it be
okay.
nice to have everything all together right
Well,
there?
there is some town land up there. I don't know if it's in that vicinity.
That's our understanding, is that there is some town-owned land back
Yeah.
there. I don't know exactly where.
That's
but
what the
yeah.
town manager had said.
Right, which having the land already is a substantial savings.
Absolutely.
I think it was $1 million for the high school property, something like that.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's off, that's on top of the construction, so,
Some of the other school districts that we've spoken to recently, they are very worried about the cost and trying to
Right.
keep the cost down for the community. And some of them will take, if it's an elementary school and there are some smaller fields around, what we've seen done is people will build the building on the fields to use that space while the older school is still in session, and then move the students over if there's a new building, and then use the other area.
oh, I see. So,
Recreate the
Yes,
fields.
recreate the fields in the parking area.
right, like at the Balmer.
Right, but quite honestly, looking at the Balmer, we know that one of the areas of concern is the parking in the
Yes.
limited parking we have there, because
Right.
being a neighborhood school years ago, I would imagine that 50 years ago, not everyone needed to drive to work.
Well, I can tell you, 50 years, and I was just getting out of high school back then, you didn't see the pickups.
Yeah.
Okay? Everyone took the bus. If you needed to take the bus, you took the bus.
Yeah.
It was pretty understandable. I went to local school. I lived in Rockdale, and we went to the Rockdale school, which is no longer there. Actually got torched. It's now the Rockdale House. But we walked to school. But
Yeah.
I'm saying, if anybody needed to ride, but there were neighborhood schools all over the town,
Right.
which a lot of them are gone now. One's a senior center. Another one's the
The annex, the town annex.
yeah.
Yeah.
And another one is where the Christian Reformed Church is.
Oh,
Yeah, that was it was a school there.
that building or
No,
just
no,
that
no, no,
location?
building was torn
Yeah,
down.
Okay, wow.
The Christian Reformed Church was there on that street, but they built that huge addition, and that's about what, and their parking lot is where the school was, about in that vicinity. You know, and there was, of course, there was one right after the fire station.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was called the West End School. It was at that point where you have Water Street.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's all trees now, but there was a school in there.
Wow. A lot of schools in this town.
Yeah, because what the Whitens did is they built them in the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So, you know, well, back when they built them, there wasn't a lot of transportation. It wasn't even bus transportation then. So, you know, you built them where the kids could walk to them. But, you know, things have changed.
Right.
In
And-
fact, my son, oldest son, went to the senior center. At the time, it was a plumber school.
Yeah.
And the kids didn't like to use the bathroom because it was in the basement. Which all the schools back then, the bathrooms were in the basement.
Yep.
In fact, the sign-out sheet used to say basement on it. It didn't say bathroom, it said basement.
They probably would have been happy with the Balmer School restroom.
Right. Yeah,
That was
that
an
was up to
upgrade.
date. That was an upgrade. But you know, and you know, but a lot of people question the fact, well, we get the high school was over 100 years old and it's still being used, and how come this school is only 50 years?
Yeah.
But the longevity of construction isn't the same as it was.
Good point. That's true. Those floors that in the fifth grade hallway, they still have the same floors with the original steel nails. It's amazing.
Because the material was a lot more sturdier then. The cost was lower on getting that material, and that they used. They used much better material. But now, to be cost efficient, they use a lot less material. But you know, so you're going to see the high school is not. You know, if you get 50 years out of high school, we'll do well. That's regardless of what people think, and because we're approaching 20 years on it now, you're going to have to look at a new one of those one of these days.
Yep.
And if we keep living, as longevity gets better, we may see that. You know, I mean, I remember.
The other piece that and as you said that, is you said people are living longer. We did run into a situation this year that was rather unfortunate with Balmer School in the open houses. We have the second floor, and this is true at NES as well,
Yeah.
where some of our parents and family members and grandparents come to visit our students' classrooms, and they can't access the staircase. There are no elevators. There's no access
Well, there's another
to
thing
the
now.
upstairs
You have
classes.
more handicapped students than.
Yes.
When I went to school, someone in a wheelchair didn't go to school. They were either homeschooled or I don't know what took place, but was not going. And I don't agree with that. I think it's good that we were able to absorb them into the system, let them have normal childhoods. I mean, it's more going to school than just getting an education. There's a social life,
Absolutely.
you know, and it's getting to know other people and how to interact and things like that. So it's good. But now you can't have access like that. So if you've got
Correct.
someone in the grades that are on the upper floor that's in a wheelchair, you have to make arrangements for them, right?
Well, quite honestly, in both of those buildings, we do have students who utilize a wheelchair. They're unable to access the second floor. So it's up to us to ensure that anything that any other student has for a related arts class or any other special event happens on the first floor, so that there's nothing technically that they're missing or they're being
Right.
denied from the second floor.
But there again, it's almost like you single them out, and that's not good either.
No. It should be
People
open
like to-
access everywhere for everyone.
Kids like to feel inclusive.
Yes.
But, and now, you know, I was reading your report in the town book, I mean, the Hell Meeting book.
Yes.
I'm amazed at the amount of kids you have now that English is not a first language, if it's any language.
We have the number grows by the week. It's amazing, and it's
I don't think people
nice.
realize that. How many languages now?
I know we have 9. I've heard rumor that I think there might be 10 different languages.
And these are not all common languages.
No, they are languages from all over the world.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate to be able to we are all learning from the students and families in our community. But it does pose additional challenges, additional staffing, fortunately, because we've experienced a slight reduction with the incoming kindergarten class. The class
Yes,
size
I
was
saw
smaller
that.
this year. So rather than needing an additional first grade without any effect to class size, we were able to utilize school committee gave us the opportunity to take that teaching position, and we will have our third ELL teacher, our third English language learner teacher this year.
And this year we added the second, so in 2 years we've gone from one ELL teacher to go to three.
To three now.
Yeah.
How did they handle that with 9 different languages? Did they speak the language?
No.
So how do you communicate?
That's a great question. Well, we have to follow all of the state and federal guidelines in communicating with the students and the families in terms of providing written translations. So, but however, when the student comes to school, all of the instruction is in English. And what we do is depending on their level of language acquisition. So if they come in and they speak very little English, they receive more services, and we provide support with the instruction and the curriculum that should be happening at their grade level. So the teacher will come in and she will essentially maybe pre-teach the material, teach the vocabulary, use lots of pictures and resources and show video. And for the most part, our students pick things up very quickly. It's just the language they don't understand.
Right.
They definitely have all of the understanding. It's just a matter of the language that we use. And
Haven't you said that we're utilizing Google Translator too,
Yes.
like having through
Ah.
with an iPad, for example.
Okay, I was going to
and-
say, you got
Yeah.
yeah.
well, we've used that actually, as you've brought that up. We've found that that's been very effective because we'll have families that come in to register their students, and sometimes the parents don't speak English
Right.
either. So that's one of the tools that we use is we have iPods or iPads, and we actually communicate with that, and we'll have the students use that going class to class until they get a better handle on the language. But the academic vocabulary, especially at the high school, the students go into biology and chemistry, and it can be rather challenging when you're still learning basic language, but
Right.
yet you still need to access the content.
Yeah, if you're getting older, it's tougher. Young ones can pick up the language quickly. Part of the problem, too, is at home, if you go back 30, 40 years ago, or 20 years ago, people learned the language because they watched TV and they picked it up.
Right.
They absorbed into it. But now they get satellite and they watch TV in their own language,
Or they're watching it on the internet.
or they watch it on the internet, so they're not even getting it at home anymore.
We had the 2 ELL teachers come to one of our school committee meetings a few months back before the budget process, and one of the strategies you mentioned, it's harder as they get older, is if by having a third, it would allow us to have more concentrated work at the lower levels. So as they progress through the school system, they'll be in better position in terms of moving forward. And obviously that doesn't take into account someone who moves in as a high school student with
Right.
no language skills.
Well, do you have to have language immersion at every level then?
Wherever the students come in. If they come in and they are at grade 5, we need to ensure that we provide the service for whatever grade, which is, speaking of our caller in the unfunded mandates, that was an additional unfunded mandate that came out from the state.
Yes.
The state of Massachusetts was found by the Justice Department to not be providing our teachers, and the expectation that every teacher has a certain level of professional development in language acquisition. So now all of our teachers if they have a student, they're required to take a course to achieve an additional certification, and even teachers that may not have a student that's an English language learner need to attend professional development classes in order to keep their license.
Wow.
So-
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult being a teacher today than it was 30, 40 years ago.
It's very labor intensive. Not only is it difficult in the classroom with all of the varying needs of our students,
Right.
but also all of the professional requirements as well. And all
People
the
don't-
data.
They
and
don't
assessments.
realize, if you don't, the town has changed dramatically. It's not the town it was when you were in high school. I'm talking people in my age group. It's a whole different situation. We're kind of isolated here, and you didn't see a lot of different people. You saw the people at the same generation after generation. That's not happening anymore. We got people coming in from all over, and it's constantly happening.
It's very interesting when we'll have an assembly at NES at the Cross Street School, and all of the little ones will be sitting in on the gym floor, and to look out, and it's a very multicultural setting. Everyone is just very individual. They're all individual, and they all look very different, and it's definitely a multicultural group that's coming up.
Yeah, and it changes more every year. They say people don't realize it. If you better be aware of your surroundings. It's not the same town. It's not that little isolated place in the Blackstone Valley. That you needed to see anything multicultural, you had to go to the city. Well, the city has come to us.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's changing it all over for sure.
Yeah, all through all its towns.
Yes.
But you're really up against a lot of. Now the state has not really increased the Chapter 70 money that much.
You know, we've received the minimum per student for the last 4 or 5 years now. So whether it's been $20 or $25 per student, that's what we've gotten the last 4 years. So the governor proposed 20, which amounts to about a $45,000 or $48,000 increase from the previous year, which obviously doesn't go very far.
No.
The Senate, no, who went first? The House?
The Senate went
The
first.
Senate, no, it was Senate?
It's in the House right now.
Senate pushed forth a $55. We'll
Wow.
see what the House. We'll see what the House does, and then obviously the governor can
Yeah.
veto it. But last year the legislature overrode the governor's veto.
Well, the legislature has the ability to do that
Yeah.
because
Yes.
you know, so
And I will say, we've been so tremendously fortunate with our legislators.
Right.
They come and visit us regularly. They are at our events. They're in town, and they talk with us regularly and support us as we look at getting additional circuit breaker money and looking at the reconfiguration of the foundational budget.
And they do contact us to find out how are these things affecting us, or if we put this type of a law in place, how will that affect the community? So they are reaching out,
Yes.
which is really great.
of course, you know, the reimbursements, you got to realize the state, the governor's, to defend the governor somewhat, he's only got so much money coming in too.
Exactly.
And things haven't been that great. I mean, the revenues are up somewhat in the state, but not that much.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're dealing with the economy like everyone else. And it makes it tough because you do have costs that are rising that you have no control over.
Right. And we realize that, again, it's that the idea of everyone has to get in line and get their fair share. We look at the roads. Fortunately, our roads in town are looking very nice
Yeah.
lately, but
Yeah.
you drive on the Mass Pike into Boston, and
Oh.
you know it's always a mode of continuous improvement. But we have roads around the state that are in need of great repair.
Oh my,
and,
Massachusetts it's unbelievable. I mean, but there's a lot of reasons for that other than just the fact there's no money coming in. It's the cost of doing it in Massachusetts is so much higher than anywhere else because of prevailing wage and things like that, which you run into as well.
Yes.
But fortunately, we've done some. You tried town manager Ted has worked hard at trying to keep costs down. I got to say, getting into this position with the electricity is going to help somewhat because if you can cut your electric budget by even 1%,
Yes.
it's a lot of money.
Absolutely, and he's been fantastic to work with as we look at the net metering agreements and sharing that with us. We appreciate that.
And then your fuel costs have gone down, heating costs, which
and
is fortunate.
utilization has gone down too, as well, in terms of back to electricity, like the utilization that were the kilowatt hours that we're utilizing is
But
less.
then you still got other things. Now I noticed that you've cut the budget. You haven't had increases. Other than you had increases, but not to the normal extent that
Yeah,
you had.
so this budget that we're hoping will be approved at Tuesday's town meeting is the first time in 3 years where we haven't had to cut services. So our goal going into the year was we want to be able to offer what we're offering this year again next year. So well, the superintendent mentioned we did add a position, but it came with the reduction of another
Right.
position that we felt
So
we could not
it
have.
basically
So
leveled off.
reorganization, yeah. But even with that, with adding no additional staff in terms of numbers and no additional programs, our budget is up about 4%. It's still a little over $1 million, and a big chunk of that obviously is salaries. I mean, we are.
Yep.
We have employees, a lot of employees, and that's what a school department is. But also special education, those costs are unpredictable. And in this particular budget year, we've seen a very large increase, and that's something that you just have to deal with.
That's been a problem for school systems now for many, many years. I remember discussing it with Henry O'Donnell. And I don't know how they're ever going to work. Had they ever reached a point, I've always said to the legislators, and I brought it up with George Peterson, I'll bring it up with Dave Moretti, can't they put the money that they put in for special education on the student so it travels with the student?
As a matter of fact, I was at the Day on the Hill, which is a day where school committee members and superintendents and the student reps can go and speak with the legislators and get the latest updates and also express our views. And that exact recommendation and suggestion was set forth at least twice during the event. So I know that conversation is out there.
Well, I've made some headway there.
So yes, you
Well,
have. They're
I've
hearing
been
you.
talking about, I talked about that with Henry O'Donnell because people don't realize a special needs student comes into town from another community, you're not seeing that money. But you're gonna take care of them.
Well, it
you
takes
get a
us.
percentage of it, but you have to wait to get it.
Yeah, you have to
don't
wait to get it,
in-
but in the meantime, what do you do? I mean, you know,
We pay.
yeah.
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 But, you know, what do you do with your household budget? If your refrigerator goes down, you don't have the money. You end up going borrow. You're in the same position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here comes a situation, and now you don't have the money until they finally reimburse you.
And then the reimbursement is only a percentage. It's a
Yeah.
fraction of the actual cost.
And what a lot of people don't realize that these special needs are not just kids that are sitting in a special classroom. You've got special needs where you're transporting kids to another school.
That's one of the largest
Yeah.
increases.
When I mentioned the special education cost, that's where we're seeing the biggest increases.
Yeah.
Students that are, they need services that we can't provide in
No, it's totally impossible.
And I think one of the pieces of that transportation line was that we discuss with transportation, and it usually gets lumped into the special education line and account and conversation, is called the McKinney-Vento, where we are required to provide transportation for our students that were living in Northbridge in our district that would find themselves in a situation where they're homeless, where they might be
Oh.
living in another town.
Yep.
They still have the rights to come and attend school in Northbridge, and
Right.
we need to transport them. So,
Yeah, well, that's another thing people don't can say. There are homeless kids in the school
Yes.
system.
and homeless could even mean needing to relocate and living with a relative, but not having their own permanent address.
Right.
So whereas stereotypically we might think of, homeless people not having any form of shelter, we have numerous families and students that are living with relatives or have been displaced, and that still is the same situation. And it happens a lot.
Right. But it's what people understand. Your biggest increase in your budget is your special ed. And no control at all there.
No, not
No.
really.
We can try, but
You can try, but it's very limited what you can
Yes.
do.
I mean, one thing we've done, we did this probably 5 or 6 years ago, is we created a program where we were able to retain students that may have had to go out to get services outside. And that's something that we track in our budget every year, and that has saved us millions of dollars over the last 6 years. I think 2010 is when we implemented it. We utilized some of the stimulus money that we got that year, and we created this program which has not only allowed us to keep some students in-house, but maybe bring some students back that were receiving services externally. So things like that you can do, but you need to have the critical mass of students to make it worth the investment, because it will be an initial investment up front.
And it does change because as our students begin in one program, obviously as they get older and their classes and grades move up, the programs need to move and change and expand sometimes as well.
Right. Well, see, I want to point out to people that you're not just, sitting there and rubber stamping budgets. I mean, you're working hard at this, and it's a year-long process.
Absolutely.
See, nobody realizes that. I served on a town board for 15 years. They don't realize how much work you do and for no pay. I serve in this place. I enjoy this. Is a love of mine. But I admire anybody who serves, because you don't get paid for that.
No.
How many years have you been on the board now?
I think this is my 9th year.
I remember when you first ran, you were going door to door.
Yeah. Seems like a long time ago, but
If you waited until now, you wouldn't have to go door to door. No one runs.
just put your name on the ballot. You're all
Yeah,
set.
I know.
6 people ran that year.
Yeah,
3
Wow.
seats.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened again since.
and that's when you had a 9-member board,
Yeah.
and you had to reduce the board because no one was running.
Yeah, and I think we've become a lot more efficient too. I think
Yeah.
that going down to 5 has really worked out well. Not to mention the fact that we would have empty seats, but but I think in terms of how efficient our meetings run and how we're able to communicate is definitely improved.
Yeah, I never saw a need for 9 people.
I mean, we looked at it. I mean, most communities had either 5 or 7, and
Right.
Anything but 9 would have been an improvement for sure.
I mean, I remember when the Board of Selectmen were 3 members,
Oh wow.
going back a number of years, but the thing is, the more people you have on a board, the harder it is to operate, because you get more opinions.
Right.
Well, we only got a couple minutes here. Is there anything you want to say about Tuesday night? Come on in, support us, and
Well, we're hoping that people will come to the meeting
Yep.
And express their views, and just being new into the invitation process, it has not given us a great deal of time. We haven't
Right.
had the gift of time to get out and really explain to people the nuts and bolts and the
Right.
actual facts of the fact that this is money that will be starting with the free cash, so there's no direct cost at this time.
right,
It will be reimbursed as we go, moving forward with feasibility, so the short-term borrowing may not even be necessary, but having it
But you
there
have to have
and
that in there,
allocated,
just in
yes, it
case.
has to be approved up front. And then it's a matter of seeing what the feasibility study yields before we can move forward.
And I think what's really important for people to understand is that will give us the facts. So we'll be able to make a decision as a community. We'll be able to come back after the feasibility study, looking at the recommendation, looking at all the facts, and make a decision, an informed decision as to what's the right thing for us to do. So this is a great opportunity. Doesn't come around very often, so we're hoping to be able to take advantage of that, and hopefully the community supports that. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that support.
Well, thank you both for coming in, and
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us. Yeah.
we'll be seeing you Tuesday night. Please go to the town meeting, people. We're having a hard time getting a quorum, for crying out loud. Don't complain, go down and do something about it.
So, and we're happy to answer any questions in the meantime.
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll see you next Wednesday on 3 on 11.
Thank you.
Thank you.